The Deer Hunter wasn't just another Vietnam War film. It was a psychological battlefield that nearly destroyed its own creators. While audiences witnessed the harrowing Russian roulette scenes on screen, behind the cameras lurked even darker realities. Budget explosions that nearly bankrupted the studio, actors pushed to mental breaking points, and a director whose perfectionism bordered on madness. Production itself mirrored the chaos of war it depicted, from Robert De Niro's obsessive hunting preparation to Christopher Walken's dangerous weight loss. From unscripted slaps to real-life PTSD, here are 20 weird facts about The Deer Hunter that will forever change how you see this American classic. And stick around for our bonus fact: the haunting real-world tragedy directly linked to this film that studio executives tried desperately to hide from the public. Number 20. The film nearly doubled its budget, risking financial ruin. What began as a $7 million production ballooned to a staggering $13 million, a financial nightmare that pushed Universal Studios executives to the brink. Director Michael Cimino, still relatively unproven with only one previous film under his belt, didn't just go over budget, he shattered it with relentless perfectionism that bordered on self-destruction. The financial bleeding wasn't gradual, it was a hemorrhage. Universal executive Tom Mount later revealed, "We were literally watching money burn every day on that set." When producers attempted to rein in costs, Cimino threatened to walk entirely. Not just artistic differences, but financial warfare. What's shocking isn't just the amount. It's that Cimino faced virtually no consequences. In fact, his next film, Heaven's Gate, would become one of Hollywood's most notorious financial disasters, ending an era of director-driven filmmaking in America. Number 19, Robert De Niro lived alone in the mountains to prepare. De Niro didn't just research hunting for his role as Michael. He disappeared into the Cascade Mountains for weeks, living in isolation with only local hunters as occasional company. This wasn't standard preparation. It was method acting pushed to environmental extremes. He came back different, recalled co-star John Savage. There was something in his eyes that wasn't there before. Something wild, but controlled. De Niro learned to field dress deer, track animals through difficult terrain, and shoot with remarkable accuracy, all skills that never explicitly appear in the final film. The physical transformation extended beyond skills. De Niro returned weathered, calloused, and carrying himself with the quiet vigilance of someone accustomed to stalking prey. What audiences didn't know was that several key emotional scenes weren't scripted reactions, but genuine responses from a man whose psychological state had been altered by weeks of isolation and immersion in a hunter's mindset. Number 18. The iconic Russian roulette scenes were partially improvised. The Russian roulette sequences aren't just the film's most memorable moments. They were created through dangerous spontaneity. While the basic scenario was scripted, much of the emotional intensity came from Cimino encouraging his actors to surprise each other on set. Christopher Walken and Robert De Niro didn't know exactly when the gun would be pointed at them or how their scene partners would react. The fear in their eyes? That wasn't acting. That was survival instinct. Cinematographer Vilmos Zsigmond confirmed, "The sweat you see is real sweat. The trembling is real trembling. We kept those cameras rolling no matter what happened." Most shocking was the moment when the Vietnamese captors slapped De Niro. Those weren't staged hits, but actual unplanned strikes delivered at Cimino's secret instruction. De Niro's rage wasn't performed. It erupted from genuine pain and surprise. The thin line between performance and reality didn't just blur, it disappeared entirely. Number 17. Meryl Streep created her character's backstory from scratch. Meryl Streep's character, Linda, barely existed in the original screenplay. What was written as a one-dimensional love interest became one of cinema's most nuanced portrayals of grief and resilience through Streep's intervention. "There was nothing there," Streep later admitted. "Just girl back home. Not even a real person." Instead of accepting this limitation, Streep created an entire history for Linda, including family alcoholism, domestic abuse, and a detailed understanding of life in a Pennsylvania steel town. The scene where Linda shops for groceries while secretly pocketing money, not in the script. Streep improvised it based on her character work, showing Linda's practical desperation without dialogue. Cimino was so impressed, he kept the cameras rolling, capturing one of the film's most subtly devastating moments. What began as nearly a cameo evolved into a performance that launched Streep's remarkable career, all because she refused to play a stereotype. Number 16. John Savage actually hung from a helicopter by his leg. The harrowing helicopter escape wasn't movie magic, it was real-world danger. John Savage, playing Steven, spent hours dangling from an actual helicopter flying 50 feet above water, held only by a harness concealed beneath his costume. "Every time that helicopter tilted, I thought I was going to die," Savage revealed years later. "Not my character might die. I thought I was going to die." When filming in Thailand, local pilots with limited film experience operated the helicopters, adding another layer of danger. What appears on screen as maybe 2 minutes of action required 3 full days of shooting, with Savage suffering leg injuries that plagued him for months afterward. The terror on his face wasn't manufactured. It was the expression of an actor genuinely fearing for his life, while Cimino demanded take after take. Safety coordinators reportedly threatened to shut down production twice during this sequence, but were overruled by a director obsessed with authenticity at any cost. Number 15. Christopher Walken starved himself almost to death. Christopher Walken's transformation into Nick wasn't achieved through makeup. It was physical deterioration. To portray a man broken by war, Walken embarked on a dangerous diet that alarmed even seasoned film professionals. Walken consumed nothing but rice and bananas for weeks, dropping nearly 30 pounds from his already slender frame. By the time they filmed the final Russian roulette scene, medical professionals on set were monitoring him between takes. Production coordinator Joanne Corelli noted, "His body wasn't just thin, his organs were showing signs of stress, but he refused to stop." The sallow cheeks, sunken eyes, and frail movements that won Walken his Oscar weren't crafted in post-production. They were the visible signs of an actor literally starving himself. When De Niro finds Nick in Saigon, the shock on his face was genuine reaction to Walken's appearance. What audiences saw as powerful acting was actually documented physical decline that left lasting health issues long after filming wrapped. Number 14. The wedding scene took a brutal 5 weeks to shoot. What was scheduled as a 1-week shoot for the opening wedding sequence ballooned into 5 weeks of production hell. Cimino, obsessed with authenticity, demanded real Russian Orthodox priests, actual steelworkers from the town, and genuine wedding traditions, down to the last spoonful of food. The wedding was filmed in a real church in Cleveland, with temperatures often exceeding 100 degrees under the lights. Extras collapsed from heat exhaustion while wearing heavy formal attire. The feast scenes required fresh food for each take, with Cimino sometimes demanding 20-plus takes of a single moment. "People think making movies is glamorous," John Cazale remarked during filming, already battling the cancer that would take his life. "This isn't filmmaking, it's endurance." What appeared on screen as a joyous celebration masked the reality. A grueling marathon that consumed nearly a third of the entire shooting schedule. When studio executives saw the dailies, one reportedly exclaimed, "We're spending $1 million to film a damn wedding that has nothing to do with Vietnam." Number 13. The film's cinematographer smuggled footage out of Thailand. Vilmos Zsigmond, the legendary cinematographer, didn't just shoot the deer hunter. He became a film smuggler to protect Cimino's vision. When filming in Thailand, government officials demanded daily review of footage, with censorship authority over anything deemed offensive. Knowing this would compromise the film's brutal honesty, Zsigmond created a daring system, shooting duplicate takes, surrendering the Tamir versions to officials, while secretly packing the raw, unflinching footage into personal luggage transported by various crew members. "If we'd been caught, we'd still be in a Thai prison," Zsigmond later admitted. The most controversial sequences, including the full Russian roulette scenes and graphic violence, left the country hidden in camera cases, clothing bags, and even hollow equipment handles. This wasn't just artistic dedication, it was criminal risk-taking that could have resulted in international incident. When Universal executives finally saw the smuggled footage, they were simultaneously horrified and amazed, realizing they possessed something unprecedented in American cinema. Number 12. John Cazale was dying throughout filming The Deer. Hunter carries a shadow most viewers never detect. John Cazale, playing Stan, was actively dying of bone cancer during the entire production. When Cazale was diagnosed, Universal Studios attempted to replace him, fearing insurance complications and potential production delays. Meryl Streep, Cazale's real-life partner, threatened to quit. Robert De Niro personally covered Cazale's insurance costs. Cimino rearranged the entire shooting schedule to film all of Cazale's scenes first, often hiding his deteriorating condition from studio visitors. Every day John was there was a miracle, Streep later revealed. He knew he was dying. We all knew. But he gave everything to those scenes. The wedding sequence, where Cazale appears most vibrant, was filmed when his condition was already terminal. The heartbreaking reality: Cazale never saw the completed film. He died shortly after his scenes wrapped, making The Deer Hunter his final performance, the last in a career where every film he appeared in was nominated for Best Picture. Number 11. The film's editor had a mental breakdown. The psychological toll of The Deer Hunter extended beyond its actors. Peter Zinner, the veteran editor tasked with assembling Cimino's sprawling footage, suffered a complete mental breakdown halfway through post-production. After weeks of cutting the Russian roulette sequences, watching the same brutal violence hundreds of times in isolation, Zinner began experiencing severe anxiety attacks and violent nightmares. Production records indicate he started sleeping in the editing room, refusing to go home because the images followed him. At one point, Zinner barricaded himself in the editing suite for 3 days, cutting and recutting the same sequence while barely eating or sleeping. When finally convinced to seek medical help, doctors diagnosed him with a form of secondary traumatic stress disorder, essentially PTSD from footage he didn't experience firsthand, but had absorbed through intensive exposure. Ironically, this psychological collapse may have contributed to the film's power. Zinner's Oscar-winning edit carries a rawness and discomfort that mirrors actual trauma patterns. Number 10. The film used real amputees as extras in hospital scenes. Go ahead and like and subscribe, because we're about to reveal how the Deer Hunter's commitment to authenticity crossed ethical boundaries most films wouldn't dare approach. The devastating veterans hospital sequence wasn't populated with actors or makeup effects. Cimino secretly arranged to film in an actual VA hospital in Pittsburgh, incorporating real Vietnam veterans with combat injuries as background patients. Many of these men didn't fully understand they were appearing in a commercial film. They were told it was a documentary about veteran care. The haunted expressions, missing limbs, and thousand-yard stares weren't performances. They were genuine trauma documented without therapeutic supervision. What Michael did was morally questionable, but cinematically undeniable, admitted production designer Ron Hobbs. Those weren't extras. They were survivors. The scene's power comes from this unsettling reality. When John Savage's character wheels through hallways of broken men, he's moving through authentic suffering. Cimino captured opportunistically. The studio later established a veterans fund after advocacy groups threatened legal action upon learning how these wounded soldiers had been incorporated into the narrative. Number 9. De Niro and Walken played real Russian roulette with prop guns. In a shocking preparation technique never publicly disclosed until years later, Robert De Niro and Christopher Walken engaged in controlled Russian roulette sessions using prop guns with blank cartridges to understand their characters' psychology. Under the supervision of the film's weapons master, the actors would sit across from each other in De Niro's hotel room, spinning the cylinder and pulling the trigger, experiencing the authentic terror of potential death while building the intense connection their characters shared. It was insane, completely insane, Walken later admitted. But after doing that for real, Even knowing it wasn't a live round, you understand something about surrender and fate that can't be acted. When blank cartridges discharged, the explosion and muzzle flash created genuine panic responses the actors later channeled on camera. This dangerous method technique was kept from insurance companies and studio executives, who would have immediately shut down production had they discovered these unsanctioned rehearsals. The practice ended when a blank misfired, burning Walken's temple and narrowly missing his eye. Number 8. The film triggered international diplomatic incidents. The Deer Hunter didn't just provoke controversy, it created legitimate international crises. When the film was screened at the 1979 Berlin Film Festival, the Soviet delegation led a walkout, followed by representatives from several Eastern Bloc countries, Cuba, and Vietnam. The Soviets didn't just object, they demanded the film be withdrawn from competition, threatening diplomatic consequences. Festival director Wolf Donner received actual threats against screening venues. The Soviet cultural minister publicly called it a racist hymn to American imperialism and suggested it violated peace agreements. Most serious was the Vietnamese government's formal diplomatic protest to the U.S. State Department, claiming the film constituted cultural aggression and violated normalization talks between the countries. Internal State Department memos revealed genuine concern that the Deer Hunter might derail delicate international negotiations. What's remarkable isn't just that a film created diplomatic incidents, but that Universal Studios had been warned by cultural consultants this would happen, and proceeded anyway, prioritizing artistic impact over international relations. Number 7. Local residents of Clairton protested the production. While The Deer Hunter is celebrated for its portrayal of blue-collar America, the real residents of Clairton, Pennsylvania, the town depicted in the film, actively resisted the production and considered its portrayal deeply offensive. When location scouts first arrived, they were met with suspicion. When locals discovered the film's Vietnam focus, that suspicion transformed into organized opposition. The town council initially denied filming permits until Universal offered substantial financial incentives. Even then, many businesses refused to participate. "They came to turn our grief into entertainment," said one resident whose son had died in Vietnam. The steel mill scenes weren't filmed in Clairton, but in Cleveland, as Clairton's actual mill owners refused cooperation. Most painfully, several scenes showing drunken, self-destructive behavior were filmed over community objections. What audiences perceive as authentic small-town America was largely constructed against the wishes of the very people it purported to represent. When the film premiered, Clairton's VFW Hall refused to screen it, instead holding a memorial service for local Vietnam casualties they felt had been exploited by Cimino's vision. Number 6. The production used disturbing psychological manipulation techniques. Cimino's directing methods crossed from demanding to psychologically abusive through deliberate manipulation of his actors' mental states. Beyond the physical challenges, he employed calculated emotional tactics that would be prohibited on most modern sets. For emotionally intense scenes, Cimino would privately tell each actor contradictory information about their scene partners, creating real confusion, suspicion, and betrayal. Before filming confrontations, he deliberately isolated actors for days, then spread false rumors about comments they'd made about each other's performances. Most disturbingly, for scenes involving the character's homecoming, Cimino arranged for Vietnam veterans with PTSD to interact with the actors while remaining in character, not as technical advisors, but as psychological disruptors. De Niro later described the experience as necessary psychological violence. Production assistants were instructed to maintain these manipulations off camera, sustaining artificial tensions between takes, and even after filming wrapped each day. One crew member reflected, "It wasn't filmmaking as much as it was orchestrated emotional breakdown. The performances are authentic because the pain was real." Number 5. The deer hunting scenes used actual kills captured on film. The hunting sequences weren't simulated or enhanced with special effects. They documented actual deer being tracked and killed specifically for the film. Cimino obtained special permits from the Washington State Game Department to hunt out of season, hiring professional hunters who worked alongside the actors. The production used real ammunition, not blanks, during these sequences. The deer that appears in the famous one-shot scene was genuinely killed on camera, a practice that would be unthinkable in modern filmmaking. When De Niro drags the deer through the forest, he's hauling an animal that had been alive just hours earlier. What's particularly disturbing is that multiple animals were killed to achieve the perfect cinematic moment. Production notes indicate at least 3 deer were shot before Cimino was satisfied with the footage. The blood on De Niro's hands during these scenes isn't makeup. It's actual blood from field dressing the animal between takes. When animal rights groups later discovered these facts, Universal denied everything, claiming all animals were artificial props, a fabrication contradicted by multiple crew testimonies and production documents. Number 4. Cimino fired the entire first week's footage. 1 week into production, after reviewing initial footage, Cimino made an unprecedented decision. He destroyed every frame shot so far and restarted the entire production from scratch. This wasn't typical reshooting. It was complete erasure. Approximately $500,000 worth of usable footage was deliberately eliminated because, in Cimino's words to stunned producers, it lacks the soul of what we're making. Cast members who had completed difficult emotional scenes were informed they needed to repeat everything with no explanation beyond Cimino's cryptic dissatisfaction. Studio executives nearly shut down production upon learning of this decision. Producer Barry Spikings later revealed, "It came down to Michael or the movie. We couldn't have both." Ultimately, Cimino prevailed through sheer force of conviction, but with a compromise. He personally surrendered his contingency payment to partially offset the cost of his decision. What's remarkable isn't just the financial implications, but the psychological impact on the cast. Forced to revisit traumatic performances, with the knowledge their previous efforts had been deemed inadequate and literally erased from existence. Number 3. The film caused actual Russian roulette deaths. The Deer Hunter didn't just depict Russian roulette, it inspired deadly copycat incidents. In the year following the film's release, at least 12 documented suicides and accidental deaths occurred when young men explicitly mimicked the film's Russian roulette scenes. These weren't vague correlations. Several victims were found with copies of the film or had told friends they were going to do what Christopher Walken did. One Philadelphia teenager died with a handwritten note reading "one shot" next to his body. In Thailand, where parts of the film were shot, authorities reported a spike in gambling-related Russian roulette games directly attributed to the film. Universal Studios executives initially denied any connection, but privately established a legal defense fund, anticipating wrongful death lawsuits. Internal memos reveal the studio consulted psychologists about whether to add warning labels to home video releases. Most disturbing was Cimino's response when confronted with these deaths in a 1980 interview. Art has consequences, sometimes terrible ones, but that doesn't diminish its necessity. The film's psychological impact extended far beyond entertainment. It literally ended lives through its powerful, if historically inaccurate, imagery. Number 2. Meryl Streep's emotional scenes weren't acting. The grief-stricken performances Meryl Streep delivered weren't created through technique. They were captured during genuine mourning. Streep was in a relationship with John Cazale as he died from bone cancer during production, experiencing real-time grief while filming continued. When Linda breaks down in scenes discussing loss and uncertainty, Streep wasn't acting. She was processing her actual emotions about Cazale's imminent death. Cimino, aware of this situation, deliberately scheduled emotionally devastating scenes on days following Cazale's worst health episodes. It was cruel and exploitative, a crew member later admitted anonymously, but it created moments of such genuine human suffering that they're almost unbearable to watch. In the scene where Linda collapses alone in her bedroom, Streep wasn't following script directions. She was having an authentic breakdown that Cimino kept cameras rolling to capture. After Cazal's death, Streep initially wanted to withdraw from the production entirely. It was Robert De Niro who convinced her to continue, arguing that channeling her grief might help process it. What audiences witness isn't just great acting, it's documentary footage of a woman experiencing profound loss in real time. Number 1. The final cut isn't what Cimino intended. The version of The Deer Hunter that won 5 Academy Awards and entered cinematic history isn't the film Michael Cimino created. His original cut ran a staggering 5 hours and 25 minutes, almost double the theatrical release. This wasn't typical editing room trimming. Universal executives orchestrated what amounted to a creative coup during post-production, waiting until Cimino fell ill with pneumonia to seize control of the editing process. While the director was hospitalized, for 9 days, editor Peter Zinner and producer Barry Spikings radically restructured the narrative. The most significant change, Cimino's original cut featured a complex, non-linear structure with extensive flashbacks and flash-forwards that deliberately disoriented viewers, mirroring the psychological experience of PTSD. The studio version imposed a conventional chronological narrative against his explicit vision. "What you've seen isn't my film," Cimino told French critics years later. "It's a commercially viable approximation." When Cimino recovered and discovered the changes, he threatened legal action to remove his name from the credits, backing down only when shown preview audience reactions strongly favoring the restructured version. Bonus fact: what remained Universal's most closely guarded secret about The Deer Hunter wasn't artistic controversy, but genuine war zone peril. Portions of the film were shot in Thailand, near the Cambodian border in 1978, precisely when the Khmer Rouge regime was conducting border raids and as the Vietnamese invasion of Cambodia began. Production vehicles were repeatedly stopped at military checkpoints, where armed soldiers, often unable to distinguish between American film crews and potential operatives, detained cast and crew members. On 3 documented occasions, bribes were paid to prevent equipment confiscation or worse. Most alarming was an incident never publicly disclosed. During helicopter sequences, the production was fired upon by Cambodian forces who mistook the filming for military activity. 2 camera operators suffered minor shrapnel injuries. Rather than halt production, Cimino incorporated the incident into the narrative, using the genuine sounds of nearby artillery fire in the soundtrack. A senior production coordinator later revealed, "We weren't making a war movie. We were in an actual war zone using cameras instead of guns." The line between filmmaking and combat journalism completely disappeared. The Deer Hunter wasn't just a film that depicted trauma. It created it, channeled it, and transformed it into art that forever altered American cinema. From its troubled production emerged something raw and undeniable, a document of both Vietnam's impact and the human cost of creating authentic art. What began as a standard studio war film evolved through pain, obsession, and controversy into something that transcends its genre. The Russian roulette scenes may be historically inaccurate, but the psychological truth they capture about war's devastating randomness remains unmatched in cinema. Perhaps the film's greatest achievement isn't its Academy Awards, but its endurance. How it continues to provoke debate about war, representation, and the ethical boundaries of filmmaking nearly 5 decades later. The Deer Hunter reminds us that sometimes the most important stories emerge not despite chaos, but through it, capturing human experience in all its messy, contradictory complexity. If you enjoyed these revelations about one of cinema's most controversial classics, hit subscribe for more deep dives into the films that changed Hollywood forever. After all, it's not what you see on screen that matters. It's understanding what it took to put it there.